As Alba said, my name is Liana Hall. I don't really have an intro. We're just gonna, I think, go straight. Oh, yeah. Oh. Hello. Perfect. Okay. Go. Imagine if we could talk as freely about depression as we could about dermatitis. Imagine there was no stigma in mental illness, and we could tell work we were late due to a panic attack as easily as we could say there was bad traffic. In 2011, I started a blog, The Year of Celebration, a manic depressive's guide to life, to share my experience with bipolar disorder to help combat that stigma. I wrote in the Bermuda Sun about my suicide attempt. I had nearly died at age 20 from the resulting organ failure. Depression had robbed me of hope, but I was grateful when I survived. Later, I appeared on BBC Breakfast and BBC World News to share my story, and strangers reached out, relieved that they were hearing their story in mine. But the more I shared, the greater responsibility I felt to prove myself a good recovering bipolar. I had also been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and had dips and dives and desperate times. I felt like I'd let people down by admitting that, so I stopped sharing so much. I couldn't talk about my trauma symptoms because then I'd have to talk about what had happened to me. Amidst chronic insomnia, vomiting panic attacks, flashbacks, and hearing voices, I became obsessed with work in an effort to sort of reclaim time I felt I'd lost being mentally ill. Daily mental stress fractures triggered rapid cycling, mania, and depression, and in the end of 2017, I found myself back in that suicidal hole. I had never planned my life much because I knew mental illness might rob me of a future. To give me something to look ahead to, I made a plan for 26 years of New Year's resolutions. I created the alphabet years, with each year corresponding to a letter to correspond with a theme. 2018 was year A, which was for art. I left Bermuda. I was to live in Costa Rica for a bit, to draw, paint, and write. In the theme of A, I was to work on awareness through meditation, aerobic activity through exercise, and practice Ashtanga yoga, which I had no idea what that was. I was to learn about Argentina and track down some alpacas, all in an attempt to heal myself. Instead, I ended up here, a trauma treatment center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Being alone in the jungle was a poor choice for someone suicidal who also wanted to still live. Without money for treatment, I had to overcome the shame of my cracking mind and ask for help. Through the funding of friends and family members, I spent 28 days at what I came to know as trauma camp. I figured my year of art was lost. However, art therapy formed a large part of treatment. Trauma is stored in the body, and talk therapy alone wouldn't heal me. I had to use my hands, not just my words. My inside-outside project represented what I was feeling on the left, what I showed the world on the right, and how fractured I was in the middle. Keeping up appearances was killing me. Art therapy wasn't about making good art. It was about making life good, and I had to expose the shame I carried from my trauma. Santa Fe rests upon obsidian, which is a stone that promotes inward seeking. In the desert ground, I'd find small, tiny, shiny pieces of black obsidian called Navajo tears. I was skeptical, but I was desperate, and skepticism beats desperation. My shame project shone light on my blurred secrets and pulled the good out of the dark. A therapist gave us a fake coin, reminding us of the change we'd throw in fountains as children along with a wish, and urged us to recall our forgotten hopes. I made an incredibly artistic cardboard well and wished for a magical life, a life with enough respite from my mental illness that I could dare to dream and make those dreams come true. Despite the fistfights in the meds line, the bullying in the smoke shack, and arguments about rooms, we patients helped each other through dissociative episodes and phone withdrawal. I needed the quote tags from tea bags to create this sculpture, and my new friends furnished me with hundreds of them. I kept my one favorite: where there's life, there's hope. A Native American shaman on staff led a drumming meditation. In my last session, I had a vision of my enslaved African ancestors crossing the Atlantic. They said, "We didn't suffer for you to go on suffering. We weren't dragged to the ends of the earth for you to just fall off the edge of it." It was a powerful and profound moment of liberation. In treatment, I had heard the root of the word courage is cor, Latin for heart. Courage originally meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. I wasn't always able to speak, but I found myself able to paint, so I painted this heart-shaped stone and left it behind. On my final night, my fellow trauma campers lit a ceremonial fire for me to burn my projects, and I watched my trauma shame go up in flames. I left impatient with healing art in my bones, and I decided to stay in Santa Fe. I started the artist's way, thinking it would get me back to writing, but treatment had changed me and my artistic outlet, but I didn't yet know how. The artist's way involved sending myself on artist dates, so I set about finding inspiration. In 1933, having been treated in hospital for psychoneurosis, the artist Georgia O'Keeffe came to Bermuda to recover. Shortly after, she found Ghost Ranch outside of Santa Fe and made it her home. I left Bermuda to find healing in Santa Fe. I felt a synergy, and visiting the ranch brought me a level of peace. But that wasn't the only synergy I found. The next gallery I visited was Meow Wolf, a modern art experience where I was invited to enter Portals Bermuda, an interdimensional vacation resort. It appeared that home was calling, but I knew that the art of Santa Fe wasn't done with me yet. When I set off on the year of art, I didn't know I'd be in Santa Fe. The city was art. Everywhere I turned, in shops, on the streets, in the never-ending galleries, in the random fields I'd stumble through, there was art. And I was inspired. I'd scrappily thrown together that clay sculpture and treatment, and I thought there might be something there. So I joined a clay studio, and I became a sculptor. It grounded me. I became lost in it. The hours I spent sculpting here were meditative, calming, healing. I'd put my fingers in the clay and I'd set an intention such as being whole, being grounded, just being, living, not dying. And I'd create and create and create, and creation was the opposite of self-destruction. When I returned to Bermuda, I painted my vision from the shamanic meditation. I had to lock it into me in a way that wasn't mental or intellectual, but was physical and spiritual, and because that's what art had become to me. The 7 represent the tribes, countries, identities, and heritage that blend together to remind me that my existence is not a mistake. None of us are mistakes. Junot Diaz wrote, "The world tells you to hurry. Art tells you to take your time. Always listen to the art." My year of art told me to take a break, to slow down, and that achievement does not make a successful life. Living does. On my last day at trauma camp, a friend gave me this wand. He made it for me so I could forever grant myself a magical life. Today I do that. I grant it all to you, too.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's not easy to be up here, and especially not easy when you are like so personal about it. So thank you. Can I have another big round of applause for her, please? And any questions?
Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. It was excellent. Thank you so much. I was wondering, you mentioned kind of those synchronicities that were guiding you along the way. Did you attribute to that kind of any kind of like a spiritual type thing, or?
I did. Interestingly, the artist's way itself is actually about finding God through creativity, and it would talk about looking for coincidences or synchronicity in life. And when I got to Santa Fe, as I said, I was a skeptic, I didn't really believe in sort of woo-woo things that much. But the more I was there, just the city itself is very spiritual, and most of it is on sacred Native American ground. And there was a girl in the treatment center who was Native American, and I bought a scarf that she'd knitted. And she said, and when she gave it to me, she said, "I hope you get your money back." And I said, "I don't understand, what do you mean?" And she said, "Oh, it's something we say in our tribe that I hope you get your money back, meaning that the value you derive from this, which I have made for you, is enough that you get your value back." And it was those sort of interactions that kind of really just set the grounding for my time there, yeah.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so kind of reflecting on Martha's talk as well, if you had to choose something that you do that is the tiniest thing that contributes to your well-being but has the biggest impact, could you name something?
Oh, it's really interesting because it's been, so for example, I said I was going to work on awareness through meditation at the beginning, and I found that all these things that I set out to do at the beginning of the year were all things to heal me and get me better. And they never quite happened the way I was expecting them to, but bizarrely, through the shamanic meditation, I got into this rhythm of sort of sitting and meditating and asking my ancestors for help or strength or support. And so meditation I do pretty much daily now, which I never expected that to be the case. And that was, that's probably the small thing that just 10 minutes a day makes a massive difference. And then the art, of course, too.
Hi, Liana. I think your presentation was incredibly brave, so congratulations for having that courage to stand up there and tell your story. My question is, in 2018, you said A was a letter. Tell us about 2019 and B, and what are your goals and plans?
So 2019 is B for balancing the bucket list. So there's a bunch of bucket list items that are still very much not happened, and I'm trying to fulfill a lot of them. So far, I'm only down one, which is, it's a lot of like personal goals, nothing that outrageous, but whale watching was one, which thanks to Chris Burville, I got to do. Yeah. And, there's tracking my ancestry has been one, so I want to get the DNA test done. Learning to sail. I'm actually starting sailing lessons in June, so I can do that. And tracking my ancestry, part of that is going to visit my mother's family in Malaysia as well this year. So some of them may not happen, riding in a hot air balloon. It's funny, I just consulted my list to be like, where am I on it? Properly getting to, 2 minutes free diving, that kind of thing. So it's just a lot of personal goals, but yeah, balancing the bucket list is 2019.
First of all, well done. So in terms of balancing your bucket list and having listened to the evolution of the year of A, maybe part of the bucket list is that it will always be changing. And that's kind of an exciting thing to take into 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, I think it does change. I found like a bucket list from like, I don't know, I must have written it like 15 years ago, and I think it had 4 things on it. I don't even remember what they were, but they were things like that I did, but I realized again back then, I didn't have that many hopes and dreams. Like I didn't give myself the freedom to wish that because I just often didn't want to be here. And that was a really hard thing to kind of balance between wanting these things in the future and not really understanding how I was ever going to overcome my mental health difficulties to do that. And, since treatment, I've been the most stable I've ever been in my life for the longest period of time, so.
I just saw a few days ago the documentary on the Meow story, the origin story. And it's in all of the movie theaters in the United States, and it's about the big art group in New Mexico. They have a massive art exhibit, and I saw in the movie that part about Bermuda, the Bermuda portal, and I said to myself, how in the heck did that make it into this big, massive, random art project? So did you say you were involved in creating that?
No, I just went to visit it, and then I sort of, like, the first room I walked into, it just said Portals Bermuda, and it had, like, this ocean sounds coming at me, and I was in the middle of the desert, and so it was very bizarre, and I thought, well, this is, like, what's going on, Is it calling me home? What's happening? And I did eventually come home, but it was, I stayed in Santa Fe for another couple months after that.
That was fantastic. I have just one question for it. I hope you don't mind answering it. Sometimes you have to go from surviving to thriving, and it's often, sometimes it's a fine line, other times it's a very wide line. Do you think you are surviving or you're thriving, and have you found the difference within yourself so that you're happier?
So I actually look at it as 3, surviving, living, and thriving. So they're kind of like the spectrum for me. And I think, it's interesting being bipolar because I often live on opposite sides of the spectrum, and these days I live much more in the middle, but it takes a lot of maintenance. And what I think thriving means to me is living in the middle mood-wise, but living excited about life, in terms of like my emotional optimism, I suppose. So right now I would say I am definitely thriving. If I look to even 3 years ago, when I couldn't, or even 2 years ago, but there was times where I really didn't think, if 3 years ago me, or 5 years ago me, or 10 years ago me could see me now, they would have so much hope. So yeah.
Yes, that was amazing.